Hello, welcome to lesson 5 of lesson 2. So we're going to look at some more drum fill ideas during this lesson. Specifically kind of like in the first, well, in a lot of the fills actually, we're going to incorporate the bass drum because that's an area that people kind of don't think about. In drum fills, then we're going to look at kind of like some cymbal and snare drum combinations together, and then some what I call like groove-based fills. So without any further ado, let's have a look what we've got. So the first two are specifically looking at incorporating the bass drum within our drum fills. Because generally I find like a lot of people when they're playing a fill, yeah, you know, they do all the toms and all of that, but then people neglect to think that we've got another sound down here on the foot that we can use for part of our drum fills, and it does add another kind of like nice tone and texture to our fills. So what we're going to do with our first one, fairly straightforward groove, got a crash on beat 1, 2/8 notes on beat 3 on the bass drum, but then for our fill, what we're going to be playing is, to start us off with, is all 8th notes. We're going to actually start the fill with the bass drum, so we're going to have 2 on the bass drum, 2 on the high tom, and then bass drum, snare, snare, bass. So our fill is going to sound like this. Okay. Watch out for, we finish on a bass drum over here, and obviously we're going to start on a bass drum, so when we finish off we're going to get a as we go back to the first beat. So I'll play it through and I'll leave this on the screen, then I'll make the I'll zoom in on me in a sec. Okay, if we play it a little bit faster. Okay, so bearing in mind with this one, everything wants to be flowing along at the same speed because it's all very much 8th note based. Okay, so if we look at the next one, which won't zoom down or scroll down, there we go. Let's move me back up there. Let's move for some reason. Okay, so we've got a pretty much, well, it looks a much more complicated fill. This is a fill that actually looks and sounds a lot more complicated than it is. First bar's the same. Okay, so we've not changed that. We've then got a fill of 16th notes. Now, your best way with a whole bar of 16th notes is to break it up into sections or little chunks. A lot of the time it will be like 4 groups of 4, which will give us our 16 notes. What I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to break it up slightly differently. We're going to do a 4, a 4, a 5, and a 3. And if you kind of remember those numbers and count those numbers, rather than counting your 1-yander, 2-yander, count slightly differently. We'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. That's going to give us our 16 notes, but it's easier to remember those chunks. And really, if you're playing a fill like this in a song, you wouldn't want to try and read this and sight read it because there's just too many notes to try and read at that speed. So it's a case of working out what you're going to play, memorize it using those numbers and breaking it up into little chunks, and then you can just do it from memory. So our first 4 is going to be snare drum, high tom, floor tom, bass drum. Okay, so we want to be playing that right, left, right, foot. Okay, now our second group of 4 is the same thing. We're going to repeat it twice, so our 4 is the same thing. So you can leave your left hand up here and the right hand is just going to move between the snare drum and the low tom. Okay, so it's going to go like this. Okay, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've then got, I mean, you could break this down as another 4 and a 4, but I'm going to do it as a 5 and a 3. We've then got 5 hits on the snare drum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the last bit, 3, is just going down the toms. So it's high tom, middle tom, floor tom. So if we put all that together, 4, 4, 5, and 3. And I'm going to sneeze. Yes? No? It's gone? Oh, hang on. Excuse me. I'm not going to edit that out. It's fine. It's a sneeze. Right, here we go. So the whole fill's going to go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Now, what you got to watch out for with this is that, first of all, you don't get your headphones tangled up like I just did there. Obviously, we're going from an 8th note kind of like groove, okay, into a 16th note fill. So bear in mind your fill is going to need to sound like twice the speed of this. So you've got to watch the speed you play this at, because what you don't want to do is like go through really fast on that and go like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2. Okay, so if you're playing your groove at this sort of speed, your fill is going to be that speed, and you don't want to attempt it that fast, believe me, to start off with. So the trick is go really, really slow with your groove, nice and slow with your fill, and then build it up in speed. 3, 1. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Again, try this with a metronome. Just slow it down a little bit. Practice just the fill so you can get the timing of the fill. So like. And if you're not sure if you're getting the timing right, just go back and just try a simpler kind of 16th note fill. Just going. So you can get that 16th note kind of feel in your head and then do this fill. Often what I will do as well is when I'm on like beat 3 of the groove, I'll start counting 16th notes so I know how fast I've got to go. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3 E and 4 E and da 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so a tricky-ish fill, but not as bad as it kind of looks, and it does sound a lot more complicated than it is to play. And once you get your speed up, okay, it sounds pretty cool. So that's that one. So for our next one, we're going to incorporate a few things. We're going to have the bass drum in there, as we've just been doing. We're also going to have some unison hits that we looked at in the previous lesson, in lesson 4, which is this bit here. So we're going to have our snare drum, our low tom, and our bass drum playing 4/8 notes together. We're then going to play the crash and the snare together. Okay, which is something we've not actually, if you've just been following these lessons through, we've not actually done before. What you've got to watch out for is the natural thing is when you do your crash, is to play the bass drum with it, because that's what we've done all the time so far. So just watch out for that. You've got to play your crash and your snare together, followed by your foot, crash and snare and foot. So I guarantee most of you at some stage during this will play your foot with the crash when it should be your snare drum with the crash, because it kind of feels a bit weird, first of all. So our fill is going to sound like this. Again, we're finishing on a foot, so we're going to have that foot crash going back to the first beat. Put it all together, it's going to sound like this. And so on. Obviously, if you've got two crashes like that, you can get some different sounds out of it. Okay, so once you've got the crash and the snare thing together, it's a fairly straightforward sort of fill, but a bit faster. It's going to sound like this. And you can also play, like when you do the unison hit, you can like build the volume up as well into a crescendo, which is something we'll look at later on as well. Exercise 4, using similar sort of techniques. We've got the crash and the snare drum at the beginning now, followed by 3 bass drums, and then we're just going to have the snare drum and the low tom, and the foot in between on the second bit. So the fill sounds like this. Put it all together. Okay, so there's just a few ideas there of where you can incorporate your bass drum within your drum fills. So take that away and go experiment. And then for the last 2, what we're going to do is play what I call like a groove-based fill, where we're going to keep the hi-hat flowing. Because sometimes if you're doing if you've got a very kind of like load of grooves going through, and then you just go to a fill like this, it can kind of lose the energy a little bit, and sometimes you want to keep the flow of that hi-hat going through, which is what we're doing here. So what we're doing for our fill is bass, snare, snare, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, but we keep the hi-hat going while we play that kind of bass and snare drum fill. Okay, fairly straightforward, that one. And then the last one for this lesson, we're going to do a very, very similar sort of thing. Up to here, this is exactly the same as this one. What we're going to do on the end bit, though, we're going to go high tom, foot, low tom, foot. Now, if I play this how I would normally play it, would look and sound like this. Okay, which is fine. You can do it that way, but that end bit does get a little bit awkward to play because you kind of crossed over. There's not a lot of space between your hi-hat and your high tom to get them in there, particularly if you're playing on quite a small drum kit. What I generally then suggest you practice on the end bit is to play what's called open-handed when we get to the end bit. So rather than going like this crossed over, you're going to switch to your left hand playing the hi-hat and your right hand playing the drums. The only bit to watch out for mostly on that one is when you play the bass drum, because here you've got to play left hand and right foot together, and our brains don't like that. That takes quite a lot of thinking about to get those to play together. Okay, so just be aware of that. So if we play it like that now, it's going to look like this. Now you might want to do the whole fill open-handed like this. Okay, and actually a good thing to practice is just practice playing open-handed with a load of drum grooves. Okay, so if you're playing open-handed, your left hand is playing the hi-hat, your snare drum is playing, your right hand is playing the snare drum like this. Okay, so it's a great way of strengthening up your left hand, or if you're set up as left-handed playing it with your right hand, it's just a good way of strengthening up your weaker hand. What you might find to start with is this often happens because your right hand is so used to playing the hi-hat over there. So yeah. So you can practice the whole thing playing it open-handed as well. So a good way of strengthening up your left hand. So that basically covers everything in lesson 4. A few drum fill ideas there for you to kind of hopefully inspire you to take that on to a next level, start to make your own drum fills up, which is what it's all about. You know, use these techniques that I'm teaching in here, but then take them away, experiment, and start to find your sound and work on those. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson. Cheers.